the sense sphere. You must listen to our demands.
Well, hello. I've had a tiny break away. I just thought I needed to have a little chill away from the channel. So, welcome back, everybody. Right, here we go. The Death of Adric, The Five Faces of Doctor Who, a new relaunch of Doctor Who with new titles, music, and look. The Demise of the Sonic Screwdriver, Lonleat 83, The Five Doctors, The Two Doctors, K9 and Company, location filming abroad in Paris, Lanzarote, and Seville. The surprise return of the Cybermen, the midweek Doctor Who's at 7 p.m, the return of the Master with Anthony Ainley, the 20th anniversary celebrations, the marketing emphasis in Doctor Who, the Hawaiian shirts, Saturday Superstar interviews, the discussion of changing the chameleon circuit of the TARDIS and there's all up in arms, the Doctor Who pantomimes, the trial of a Time Lord, the Doctor in distress, dimensions in time. Yeah. We're talking about J&T. Yes, it's going to be a J&T special today, and it's well deserved. It's partly because in the Doctor Who magazine for this month, they've got an article, an interview with him just after Survival had been filmed. So if you do get a copy of the September issue, 607, you will find an interesting, and we're going to go over the interview today with my panel. So do look at that and see if you can get your copy. So we've been, although I had a tiny mini break, we have still been streaming. So look them out. That Remembrance of the Daleks was a good one. Mind of the Matrix last Friday. We had a damn good discussion about what the Doctor should really be like. Of course, switch on your notifications because at the moment I don't know when I'm streaming. So please switch them on. And if you could be so kind as to give us a subscription, it makes all the merrier. And, I do appreciate it. DM me on X. That tends to work really well for me. And email me at censorsphere@gmail. People telling me if they want to be a panelist or they've got suggestions for topics. It always goes down well with me because sometimes I ain't got a clue. So there we go. So let's see if we can get our panelists on. I'm obviously, you can only be away a day and you can get all the wrong buttons. It's mad, isn't it? Absolutely mad. So let's get our first guest on. And of course, I always have a little 40, don't I? Hello, Pure Historical. Dwayne, how are you doing?
Yeah, very well. How are you?
Well, I feel as though another stream was needed, but I'm doing all right. Now, would you recognize where that's from?
Well, it's got to be Enemy of the World, doesn't it?
I know, and we're all experts on it now, thankfully, because they found it again. Because I must admit, I saw the Target book, and I just thought, gosh, you're in Australia? Because it had all the locations, didn't it?
Certainly did. And it's one of those stories where the weakest episode was the one that existed. So we all had these expectations that the rest of the story might be just like episode 3, but it turned out that when you put them all together, it was an absolute classic. It's now my favorite Troughton story, Enemy of the World. So it's amazing what happens when you get these returned episodes and how your expectations can be completely wrong.
Yes, I agree. It sometimes skews it one way or the other. Well, obviously, last week we were talking about one serious kind of exercise you're embarking on, and how you're going with your tickets and interest.
Yeah, very good. Thank you for that, and thanks for showing it again. We're probably taking the final tour off Sylvester McCoy's poster because people were concerned that he wasn't going to do any more conventions after he came to us. But no, it was just the fact that he was coming to Australia potentially for the last time. So he is not finishing touring. But we've also got Fraser Hines and Katie Manning. Fraser Hines' first appearance in Sydney is only a few weeks away. So you can check out the details for that at sirensofaudio.com, or you can go straight to the events page, events at .sirensofaudio.com, and get all the details, links to tickets there. And Katie and Fraser together in Brisbane. So lucky people in Brisbane get them both together. So,
yeah. And what's your venue there in Brisbane, being a Brisbane lad?
It is a hotel that starts with K. I couldn't tell you off the top of my head.
Okay.
The Kennego Hotel or something like that. It's
Okay.
near Spring Hill. Near Spring Hill.
Oh, okay. Yep. Okay. Got you. Well, it's just behind us. Yeah, where I used to live. Okay. Well, I hope everybody in Aussie or anybody who's visiting Aussie checks that out. Because if I was still in Brisbane now, I'd be booking these. But I hope you sell out. I hope it really works out for you, Dwayne.
Thank you.
So let's get our next guest on. It's Cybermat, of course. Cybermat, do you like a quark?
Hello, Brendan. Yes, Dwayne. I must admit, I haven't. I'm certainly not an expert in quark territory. Yeah.
I know, but look at them. Look at them. I mean, how could you deny them?
Was it these guys that was meant to take over from the Daleks?
Oh, was it the mechanoids? I think.
Yeah, that's right.
But I mean, it looks as though it's the same quarry for Death of the Daleks, and maybe the same quarry that they use for Caves of Androzani. That sand I almost recognise.
Who'd they put inside those?
I think it was little people. No, I don't. I really don't. John might know.
It was kids, wasn't it? It was kids.
Kids. They certainly had a funny sound, didn't they? But I'll bring John on. He might know. Hello, John. Good to see you.
Hello, and good afternoon, good evening, good morning. I'd appreciate. I know everybody's all over the world now, so wherever you are, I hope you're having a good it.
So, were you a quark?
Only when doing it for money, but I can, however, tell you that inside one of the Quarks was a young actor who died just recently. I think his name was Freddie Foote, and he actually played the part of Chris Hunter, who was David Hunter's son in the long-running soap Crossroads. I'm a mine of useless information. There you go.
Yeah, that's why we've got him on. Yeah. No. Actually, I had these
information for useless.
I had these pictures for you, but everybody can feed into them because, of course, I'll call you the Phantom Piper because I love the moon base. That's another one, Dwayne, of course, where we've got 2 episodes and 2 animated, and it just seems very atmospheric. But the ones missing are the ones I want. I really do. So I mean,
I have to say I'm a fan of the animation, so I would like to see them returned, of course, but to be able to watch it all visually from episodes 1 to 4, including the animation, is a treat for me.
And I've always said, I think I've talked about this to John before with the Phantom Piper. The book, the Jerry Davis book, is what my first introduction was, and it's so well written. And to me, it's like a blooming ghost story where these Cybermen are creeping around. Absolutely loved it, John.
It is, and those we mentioned also the illustrations in the book. The book sets the tone, absolutely, but the illustrations in the book were nightmare territory for children, which we were when we first read those. Just fantastic, and you almost think it can't live up. And to be honest, it doesn't. The 2 episodes we have and the 2 episodes we have via animation, but you know what? It still drips in atmosphere. It's still great stuff. But I will forever be haunted by that book and its illustrations.
Yeah. Now, we talk about John Nathan Turner in a moment today because of this article in the Doctor Who magazine. But just before we get there, I showed you a picture of the Quarks. And I just wonder whether you think this was probably one of the worst deaths shown in Doctor Who, actually. Because when you look at what the Quarks could do to you when they shot you, I mean, I don't know. That's up there. Everyone talks about Attack of the Cybermen under JNT's reign and Vengeance on Varos, but I think,
Yeah, I agree with
Pretty
you. Yeah,
horrific, isn't it?
that first episode death,
Oh.
when they all apparently, all those characters to whom we're introduced to in the first episode of The Dominators, who we assume we're going to watch the journey of through the preceding episodes, are horribly slaughtered and in a very brutal way. Yeah, it's a bit like, to the extent, the Space Museum has a very good first episode, and then it doesn't live up to the hype later on. But you're right, Brendan, that was a horrifying death for those people, particularly as it came out of the blue. We were invited to invest in these people who went out with Cully, and then it didn't happen. They died.
So nasty. Everybody makes it sound as though under JNT's era, with Eric's era especially, that it got more gruesome and violent. But you have to always think, hold on a minute. Anyway, did you know, lads, it's 40 years ago today that Two Doctors was broadcast. And
What's the episode?
I mean, in the Doctor Who magazine, the actors mentioned, isn't he, about Shock Eye and how they're playing, but I did really well. Come on, why did I not enjoy it? Of course, I enjoyed it. Patrick Troughton's back, Fraser's back. I mean, all that funny dialogue in the TARDIS when Fraser says, "Oh, it's a big one," and it's all the usual stuff going on. Space station. But yeah, I don't know. What do you think of this one, Drain? Happy memories of this one?
I've got very happy memories actually, because I saw much of season 22 when I was traveling on road trips with my parents when I was probably 13, 14 years old. And I remember being in outback New South Wales at different caravan parks, and I would go into the games room of the caravan parks, and I would try and monopolize the TV. And if there were other people around, I would sometimes have to flick the news or something like that to get to watch Doctor Who. So I'd get dirty looks from people, but occasionally you'd get a whole audience, and then half the caravan park had been there watching these Sixth Doctor episodes with us. It was fantastic.
Well, you've got Jacqueline Pierce, they're in Seville, William Walkie, that we could only do Benidorm and try and refilm it, but there you go. So happy memories. And look at these shots. I mean, gosh, I know they finished their filming early, didn't they? And oh well, a good time was had by all. Look at it.
Yeah, it looks a bit. Yeah.
It reminds me of those teacher residentials when you've done the workshops, and on the night it's the bar. It's fantastic. But yeah, look at that. I think they had.
Who is that? Is that anyone we recognise with Fraser?
Girl Tuesday. I really don't know.
Wasn't there was a story in one of the commentaries? I think. I think you're right, Dwayne. There was a connection with that person in the show. She wasn't the lady that threw the rose down, was it?
Oh, I don't
Yeah,
know.
there was. They had a guy from who was, I think, related to someone at the British Embassy or the British Consulate.
Yes.
There, and I think was her name Mercedes or something along those lines. And I think Fraser Hines, who was known for being quite the Lothario, was quite enamoured of her. And yes, you're right. I think they did have a scene where they included her throwing the rose down to Starry, and she was wearing, get this, what was to be the original Chicini costume, but they changed, I think, after Elizabeth Spriggs couldn't play the role anymore. So there you go. Another bit of Eustace.
Another bit. Well, just before we get moving on, I'll say hello to the thread big time. So Divine and Dragon, Milo, SG, who obviously I've responded to because I said it was 40 years since it was broadcast. No, it was 40 years since it was filmed. MCTV, hello, Yokai 63, afternoon. It's great to be off work and indulge in my Who obsession. Of course. Who loved it? I always remember being, off school, and you couldn't watch Doctor Who, but I could sit in my bedroom and read a Target book, and that was my, sick day.
You could play the Genesis of the Daleks, a bridged version, which had by that point come out either on vinyl or a cassette. So I played that endlessly to the extent that I knew every single word of it.
But John, But John, you're an ex-head teacher, and you should know that there's a spin on this. You can't say to your mum that you're very sick and you're looking as though you're enjoying yourself too much. You have to kind of just hide in bed with a book.
You can, yeah, but you can do it provided you ate the boiled egg mashed up in a cup, which was always the thing you got when you were sick as a child.
Yeah.
Boiled egg mashed up in a cup.
And then your mum threatens you with Adric pajamas, and you go, "No, I'm not that sick."
I'm better. I'm better.
So, Boomer Doug, good to see you again. Another fellow Aussie there. Crimpling de Bloom, left-handed dragon. Why am I saying that? Left-handed Jedi. I'm mixing the two together, I suppose. Lee Smith's in again. Hello. Michael Herbert in Manchester, the biographer of Malcolm Hulk, who, of course, we'll have back on. Hunter Callan saying, love Moonbase with the Cyberclaw gloves. Yeah, I don't like the gloves in Earthshock. I prefer them in this, yeah. SG, Dominators was in Jared's Cross Quarry. Morris Barry, of course, and it was the same quarry as Tomb of the Cybermen, which I thought was lavishly filmed. It made it look as though it was abroad. Hunter Callan, it was an excellent base under siege episode. Oh my god! And of course, they didn't know why the air pockets were losing air and everything. Absolutely loved all that. The mystery is what you need in Doctor Who. Mystery. But we've got Smearon Sykes, East Roader. Gosh, you're all off work? No, it's all your Australian evening, maybe. Greg Smith, my main problem with the two Doctors is the Sontaran design. I thought they were shafted, basically, the Sontarans in the two Doctors, unfortunately. I was looking forward to, although I did like to see the three spheres. I thought, well, hey, a bit of battle action in Doctor Who. You don't get much in those days, really.
I thought the Sontarans had opened up a pawnbrokers when I saw those.
Yeah, and different sizes. They're cloned very badly.
Walls come in all shapes and sizes.
Yes, it's a very, very strange cloning technique there.
So we're here to talk about John Nathan Turner, who, he was there for a decade. And, there's the list of producers. He was the last, obviously, Doctor Who producer, when you think about it, because they all like their titles nowadays. I find it very funny when nowadays they say, the Doctor was very pompous. And, of course, they all love to be called showrunners. But there's the last Doctor Who producer, John Nathan Turner, 1980 to 1989. But as we all know, he was on the series before then as a production assistant and everything. And then, of course, so you can see the time frame there, and then you can see that the only person who rivals him, as in JNT and RTD, it's the two of them, isn't it? They've been long-lasting on Doctor Who. And of course, I listed, he did books, he did merchandise, he came up with the Lonleat stuff, he helped break America. He did so much. His legacy is massive, is John Nathan Turner's. And I think it's going to be fascinating to talk about. So I know not all of you have seen the magazine, but obviously I will have screenshots. And those of you in the thread who are watching, of course, if you haven't got the magazine, we've screenshot various ones so we can get talking now about what came up from it. But of course, he's always been in that magazine because he's helped kind of make it flourish, actually. So there's the latest magazine, September issue 607. And there's 6 pages on this interview with a kind of history and English student, I think it was it? I think, yeah. And he interviewed him just after Survival had been filmed, but JNT had just learned that they hadn't taken up the series. But of course, good old BBC, they were looking for an independent production. They've been doing that now for 34 years, right? Disney's not the first iteration at all. But anyway, let's get into some of this. Now, this isn't in the actual magazine. This is an earlier interview with John Nathan Turner. And I just wanted to kind of pick your brains on what you thought, because, of course, I think we're due a revision of John Nathan Turner, because sometimes when you said John Nathan Turner in Who circles, people meant showbiz only, the showman, the Hawaiian shirt, stunt cast. It depended on who you were. That's what he was synonymous with. But one of the questions he was asked, do you think you've been too long at Doctor Who and all the rest? No, it won't affect my career. And I think, sadly, we might discuss that. But the question halfway through there, what other kind of show would you like to produce? I'd love to do soap opera, strangely enough. A rather glamorous one like Dallas or Dynasty. And I've put a very kind of glamorous Rani there. Because isn't it funny that RTD and JNT, they're very different people, but I always get the sense that RTD would like to do soap opera too again. And it looks like John Nathan Turner was equally one of his kind of dreams. Dwayne, what are your thoughts on a revision of John Nathan Turner needed?
Well, it's interesting because we were talking before we started, and I've been watching the Showman documentary off the season 26 Blu-ray, and yes, he definitely did want to do soap opera. He was very open about that, and I guess there were elements of. He also liked Panto. He did that as well as doing Doctor Who at the same time, even with the cast. So he liked elements of that. He possibly brought some elements of Panto into the TV series, but he never really did much soap. He possibly did that with the relationship, touched on it a little bit with the Seventh Doctor and Ace relationship, but it really wasn't full on soap opera, and that was more Andrew Cartmel anyway, rather than JNT, because by that stage he was handing over more to Andrew as the script editor. But yeah, he never really brought that soap element into the series. I don't think. Not as much as it has been in more recent times.
Yeah.
Not until Dimensions in Time.
Yes, the 3D experiment. It's just been mentioned in the thread, but there you go. I'm sure a few of us have this. The Totally Tasteless by Richard Marston. Really good read on John Nathan Turner. I've actually put it on one of the thumbnail pictures there. It's a brilliant resource. Smevron Sykes said that. John, is he due? Has he had a revision, or is he due a revision by Doctor Who fans?
He probably has had a revision, he was there that long. I think it's not so much John Nathan Turner as each of the sort of eras that he presided over have all been revised and looked at differently. The man himself was revised, I think, even during his own tenure. He went from being insanely popular to insanely ridiculed and vilified to some extent by certain aspects of fandom, which, when you consider Doctor Who is ultimately just a television program, was an absolute disgrace at the time. And a lot of these people are still active in fandom and should hang their heads in shame, I still believe. But Doctor Who in all its aspects will continue to be revised. In terms of the soap opera element that you were talking about, we didn't get the full-on sort of soapy elements that we now have in Doctor Who, particularly with Russell Davies. But when Doctor Who moved to the twice-weekly slot, we began to see again something we hadn't seen since the Hartnell era: companion bedrooms, little snippets of conversation relating to previous adventures, previous stories between Tegan and Nyssa, these sort of things. And I think Doctor Who benefited from that. It gave the companions who, in those days of Doctor Who, weren't able to have arcs or develop in a way that they do now. It made them seem more approachable. I was going to say human, but obviously two of the companions in those three were alien, but it made them seem more approachable and identifiable. And I remember also he also introduced the three companion scenario within the TARDIS very early on in the Davison era. So a lot to unpack about there, but I still believe he's a producer who, because his reign was so long and so uneven, if you like, in terms of his qualities, will continue to review, re-review, and re-review for many years to come. Why? Because he was on so long and we're Doctor Who fans.
And I can't help comparing now. He's like I said, I'm going to take you through the interview. So anyone who hasn't seen the magazine still get it, but you're getting a kind of preview if not. Now, I wanted to just ask you all about this because I'm doing it through the prism of we've just had season 1 of RTD, and of course I still haven't been completely detoxed Cybermen, So this is the process, and of course in every interview RTD has done, I think in the last year or so, he keeps saying the 8-year-old. Doctor Who was for 8-year-olds. Doctor Who, I'm imagining the 8-year-old. And he goes on about this 8-year-old thing. And, Space Babies is for the 8-year-olds. And you lot who don't get it, and we know where we go next. And yet I find it very interesting that John Nathan Turner, who looked after Doctor Who for a decade and was involved in it for longer, at both ends actually, trying to keep interest in the program. When asked by this student from uni, are particular student stories aimed at a particular age group? He said, well, we build stories around 3 levels. And he talks about the age range and the cross-section that they're trying to grab. And that kind of allies with what I've always been saying. And I always use my Genesis of the Daleks example, that the adults got the fascist element, the kids got the adventure, and we went all the way down. I think JNT gets it much more than this RTD example of it's for 8-year-olds and it's for kids, and we're trying to get the new generation. Well, of course, you always have to get the new generation with Doctor Who. But no, Doctor Who is for everybody.
Yeah, well, there's definitely, even classic and New Who you can appreciate on multiple levels. And certainly, the JNT era is my era that I grew up with. And, I probably appreciated it as an 8-year-old. And the two Doctors especially is probably one of the reasons why I have such a mixed recollection of Patrick Troughton and Colin Baker at the same time, which got clarified later. But in terms of the JNT era, I think it is getting revised, and I personally never had a problem with it. Sort of growing up through the wilderness years, it wasn't till looking back I realized what a what's the word? What a polarizing figure he appeared to be in hindsight. So with Fandom, but I think overall, given the time that's passed, it's hard to look back on it and be critical of any of it, really.
Well, that's the beauty of revisionism, which is you bring where you are now and what you've experienced now. And I've just experienced season 1 and the specials of RTD. So when I see this, Dwayne, about 8-year-olds from RTD, this obsession with the younger generation, and then I see that JNT says we've done our research, you get a cross section, and that's what they're pitching for. They're not pitching just to the kids. That seems to be a big difference to me.
Yeah, but there's more than he's not just pitching to a demographic. He's trying to appeal to everybody. Like he's talking about the 3 levels there. He wants to do the monsters, wants to appeal to the age group, and he wants to see. He says that there is a place for a message, because no one ever says that there's no place for messaging in a TV show. But notice his wording there: a thin layer of message. That's the point. That should be what's injected into these stories, so that does appeal to everybody. And that way you can put I think he talks about messaging more throughout the article too.
He does. And
throughout the interview. And it's very interesting the way he views it.
Well, don't you worry, lads. I've got those screenshots as well. So, the messaging, everybody. We're going to talk about messaging and how that compares to RTD. We talk about the age range. We talk about the treatment of the Doctors, Ace, companions, etc. So, John, did this surprise you, or did you go, well, because, RTD is selling this idea that he is the one who really understands Doctor Who. But this is a different version to me of what Doctor Who is.
Yeah. Jonathan Turner was ultimately a very professional BBC employee. Back in those days, the BBC nurtured its staff. They were brought in as trainees and learned the trade, and they grew and they grew and they grew and they grew. Some went the director's way, some went the production way, some went the scripting way. Probably Jonathan Turner may well have been better being a producer in light entertainment more so than drama initially, but he ended up, he knew Doctor Who and he knew it well, and he was able to take over Doctor Who at a time of what eventually became a time of great trials and tribulations for the programme. he was the best man, I think, to see Doctor Who through that period, because he was able to make a lot go a long way. Russell Davies at the moment has a budget that previous producers of Doctor Who could only dream of. He can afford to pick and choose. He can afford not to make the programme as tightly scripted, as well plotted, as well characterised as it had, because you can say, oh, there's a lovely big effect now. And that tends to be Doctor Who's problem now. There's too much bangs, flashes, and gizmology going on at the expense of decent plotting, decent characterisation, decent stories. Jonathan Turner and previous producers didn't have that. And strangely enough, when they did do it, were the times when people sort of looked down their noses at the Nathan Turner thing, you know, when they thought, well, it's all superficial, it's all up front and not, there's not much going on behind it. But if you look back to season 18, his first story, there's an earned lesson there for all showrunners of Doctor Who to do, that he made Doctor Who look, sound and feel different.
Yeah.
At the same point as still being identifiably Doctor Who. Russell Davies, go watch season 18.
And you've got here from the John Nathan Turner's answer to the question about Kinder being maybe more grown up because of the Buddhist symbolism, etc. And he says, yes, it's got adult themes, but I'm sure the younger audience would enjoy it because of the striking visuals, the story would pitch at different levels. And then he dismisses to a degree that the Buddhism fable would go over the heads of teenagers. I love the way, you see, there's a different way of talking, Dwayne, from these two showrunner producers. In this article, we were saying earlier, weren't we? He can, the way he speaks to the fan or the student, he's still as protective as RTD sounds of the program, but he's just much more measured, I think, in how he deals with it. He doesn't dismiss this person. He just says, I think you're over egging a few things.
Yeah, I was going to say, he's not shutting him down. He's allowing the fan, well, he's not even a fan necessarily, but he's allowing the interviewer to have his view and to put the questions to him, which some of the questions, not even this one so much, but later on, he really pushes him hard on certain things. And I kept thinking, if this was RTD would be telling him to shut up by now and go away. JNT never did that. He always took the question on, he thought about it and gave a measured response that was very logical, wasn't emotional, but he gave all excellent reasons for his responses.
And of course, the thread, it's a Marmite issue, although I think people are being kind in retrospect mostly. Anthony Parkinson, RTD, has admitted out loud now the show is just a vehicle for his agenda. And as Dwayne was hinting at, I've got some screenshots where we'll come to that. MCTV, apparently he was very showbiz and far too ignorant about sci-fi, yet yes, too light entertainment and pantoish. That's one of the synonyms, one of the synonyms for JNT as from some fans. But I have to say, you've got Caves of Androzani, Vengeance on Varas. You could go on. And as John says, from the Leisure Hive, I mean, Tachyonics. I mean, wow. Yeah. Go on, John.
But yeah, just on that point, Brendan, absolutely. But this is also, he was a showman. He was light entertainment. But he was a good man at stretching a budget, getting all that to Doctor Who. And when you tie that skill to a good script editor and a good team of writers, you've got everybody bringing a skill to make the whole thing work or work better. It's entirely the same sort of setup we should have now for Doctor Who. Doctor Who's big problem now is that you have someone at the very top of the pyramid telling everybody else what to do, and everybody at the bottom and below that in the pyramid's scared to say, you know what, would this not be better if? So when John Nathan Turner was on his own, I give you Time in the Rani. Now, I happen to like Time in the Rani, but that was John Nathan Turner without a script editor, just working with that. And you see what Doctor Who would have been like, unfettered by a script editor and a good team around him. The fact that I like it is an irrelevance. I wouldn't have liked a season like that or a whole series like that, but one-off, it's fine. But with a good script editor, a writer, and a team around him to bring all their skills, that's the way it works. At the moment, it's the system that's at fault. There's no one pushing against Russell Davis.
And if anybody does read this article from the Doctor Who magazine, because I don't have the screenshot of every answer, obviously, he does talk about with some of the scripts that they were checked out by the script editor, they were checked out by him, and he goes through a sequence of people who check before it is allowed. I think he's defending the shock eye thing, but he said, I have to say, did you all notice though that how many times did JNT in the overall article say that's my fault? And he's very openly says, maybe I should have had a word with John Stratton about the performance of Shock Eye. That's my fault. And there were a couple of occasions where he goes, that's my fault. He immediately is self-critical.
Yeah, because
I think
instead, probably he's the boss, and good bosses do take the responsibility. You know, for example, if you inherit a show and you get 4 and 5 million viewers, and by the end of that first season it's down to 1 million and a bit, take the blame. It's your fault, Russell Davis. You're doing something wrong. So John Nathan Turner, as a boss, is doing what his job necessitates. I'm at the top. I take the flag.
Yep, Cyberman.
Yeah. No, I mean, some of the stuff we've seen of JNT fronting up and being forced to sit there by the BBC, you know, some of its programs and things to cop the feedback live on air and things like that. I mean, it's just cruel, and you know, I mean, you certainly wouldn't see it from the current showrunners, but also, you know, bearing in mind that for half of his tenure, it was pretty evident from what we know now that the BBC, you know, the powers that be really wanted the show to die and wanted it to go out the back door quietly. And even in spite of all that, you know, you can just see that guy doubled down and say, you know, that show went on for another 5 years that probably wouldn't have happened if he hadn't stuck around and fought for it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I've got 2 slides on the same point here, and then I'll bring in Dwayne. Now, can everybody in the thread who hasn't read the article yet notice this? Because we've just had season 1 and we've heard all the interviews from RTD. And John Nathan Turner says, I try to be non-political. There may be a political motif in the show, that's it. And if I do, then I think that I'll show another side in another story. So in other words, he tries to show balance over a season, hopefully not presenting a bigoted view of anything. Second slide, just to kind of round off the point. And this is where he pushes slightly back on the questioner who seems to be asking about messaging and everything. That isn't the case at all. It's not of kind of, right, let's teach the British public the error of their ways. It's more, let's do a story on the basis of what, and in this case, it was the Video Nasties' Vengeance on Varos. Let's just kind of have a look at that again, Dwayne. RTD says, you know, these are dark times. We need this type of actor, doctor. I need to show and platform these things. Meanwhile, JNT says it's a non-political show and I'm not here to preach.
Yeah, absolutely. Where JNT says there, let's teach the British public the error of their ways. He says that, and that's not what they're trying to do. Yeah. Well, that's what you get a sense that their current production team is exactly trying to do. But it's not just Doctor Who. As I've said before, it's entertainment in general does this. You know, the creatives are generally very left-leaning, so their points are going to be, you know, are really pushing hard in that direction. And that seems to be what you get. And what JT said in the previous quote was that if they do make some kind of political statement, he tries to balance it out with something. If it's not in the same story, then a different story on the other side. He said the number one thing that they want to do is entertain people. We're not there to have, you know, political rallies. We're there to entertain people.
Yeah, I mean, Cyberman. I mean, it's funny. Steve on Sykes says, "I reckon the creative tension between Christopher H. Bidmead and JNT is what makes season 18, which John Daly was referencing, makes it so strong." And that's the point. Well, there's no checks and balances. It feels like now, and so you know, let's remember the producer is saying, "I will try and offer balance if there is a political message." We don't hear that now. I also and so basically you're getting the politics of RTD.
Yeah, I mean the classic show always had. I mean, it's obvious when you look at it now, but at the same time, the characterization, the writing in and I'd say this was true of New Who right up until probably about season what was it, season 10 or 11, was pretty tight in terms of characterization, which made it, you can have messaging when the writing's tight. It's only when you start telling and not showing that it all falls apart.
Where is there anything, John, where you think that this is his mission, this is how he wanted it? Sometimes we fall short. I mean, we did Remembrance of the Daleks out a week back, and I think we thought that was pitch perfect regarding how the political messaging was integrated into the narrative, and it was a damn good story. When you look back at the decade of JNT, can you think of a story where you thought it got preachy or political too much?
No. I think I can say that even without thinking about it. No.
Yeah.
Interestingly, the program you mentioned, Remembrance of the Daleks, comes along precisely because there's a new script editor, new young man in town, Andrew Carmel, who's going to message, and he too is left-leaning, and he admits him and Ben Aronovich and the sort of writers' room that they got together, they wanted to go and tackle the world, but they wanted it in such a way that it was with the story, not rubbing up against it, as we just said there. It was going to be show, don't tell, and very, very strikingly during Remembrance of the Daleks, we had the no coloured sign, and that's, you get a whole sense of the time, the attitude, and the prevailing racism of the 60s in London, and indeed across the United Kingdom at that point, just by one sign. And you also see Ace's response to it, and 80's response to that. And if you remember, what Andrew Cartmel was very proud of that scene, took it to the director of drama at the BBC, who answered a phone call at the time and said, he rewound the tape and said, I want you to watch this. I think it was Mark Chivas. And he watched it again, and then he said, no, you should have made it tear up. Now, at that point, shows you where BBC left-wing leaning drama interferes and makes it too strong. And that way it becomes Ace making a big message. I think the message is far better, far more subtle, far more directed, just by showing it. And that's where modern Doctor Who gets it all wrong,
And that's what I mean. Michael Herbert was in the third a bit earlier, but yeah, the Malcolm Hulke element was even the baddies. You give them a glimmer. It's not just black and white. But I'm interested in Crimpline's point here. The timing of the publication of this interview in DWM is interesting. Is the editor of Doctor Who magazine, Jason Quinn, sending us a message that he knows a lot of us are unhappy with the current show? Well, I mean, I'm sure this article's been in the making for quite a long time, and they've had their hands on this interview for ages. It is interesting because I know we've been a bit spiky about Jason Quinn and what's going on, and his face is on everything. But
not been through. Has he got any more pictures of himself this month?
I think he's been listening to you. I couldn't see much on him.
Yeah,
but yeah. Well, timing, But I always thought under the
maybe it's just the fact J&T sells.
Well, I always thought under the JNT era, he worked very closely with the weekly and the magazine too, didn't he? And so, I mean, I don't know. Let's have a look. So, next one on the that's the cab on the rank, so to speak. Yes. McCoy's speech at the end of Battlefield against nuclear weapons seemed very left-wing, says the questioner, with the poetic language bringing it over very strongly, blah, blah, blah. John Nathan Turner, it was left in because I thought it was making a valid point in the story. It was totally valid to stop her, Morgaine, doing what she was doing. It wasn't a political story in my judgment. And this is where I really loved imagining him speaking, Dwayne, because I can see, I used to see him on Saturday Superstore, on Open Air, all our programs over here, when he was the first proper producer, when you actually saw him in front of the camera, explaining the program quite a lot and defending it and pitching up. And, but he wouldn't take any nonsense. I have to say, he was never rude. I never saw him as rude. He had to face an awful lot of horrible criticism sometimes, but he was always very polite, but firm. And he is an example of that, Dwayne, where it's not a political story, but it needed to be in that speech.
Yeah, absolutely. And I really appreciate every time I watch an interview with JNT. He's very measured, he's very polite, but when he's got an idea in his head, he is kind of quietly forceful. He doesn't put anyone down, but he makes his point in the strongest way that he can, politely. And I think that's a quality of his that is lacking in a lot of people.
Yeah. So he pushes back on that, and then of course remember. Sorry,
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but just on the battlefield thing, this again is down to the good writing. I don't see McCoy's speeches in any way left leaning or left wing. He's having a pop at nuclear weapons, and the whole point about the thing is, are these the weapons you would use? He's talking about the not using nuclear weapons, and the whole point about nuclear weapons is not using them. It's the threat of their use is the point, because remember, the Soviet Union, which was at that point a communist union, extreme left, up against the United States and NATO, capitalist societies, both with nuclear weapons. So there was no left-right dichotomy here about nuclear weapons. It was about their usage, and I think it was more a story to regain that people who are sensible and straightforward and strategize properly don't use nuclear weapons. So I don't see that. I don't see that as a left-leaning thing. I just think it's pretty good writing. You can have a pop on nuclear weapons. Who wouldn't?
Yeah, so good to see JWC reviews. Sorry, I'll come in, Drain, with you in a minute. The beauty of Classic Who was that the political message was skillfully interwoven into the narrative, unlike the on-the-nose approach of RTD. Drain, you were going to come in then.
Yeah, there's also an exchange earlier in the story between the Brigadier and Morgaine, where she lets him go because she sees the honor in him as a soldier. And part of that speech at the end is about the Doctor having a go at Morgaine, saying, is this really an honorable way to wage your war by just nuking everybody? So, that's quite a valid point and part of the story, just like JNT says.
Yeah. Stephen Bellow, it's not the message, it's the hit across the head, clunky writing of RTD. Well, yes, I mean, point one, Dot and Bubble, he wanted to test whether the fans were racist and noticed. I mean, honestly, I can't imagine JNT at any point saying he's going to challenge fans as they're watching the show, because as he said, it's about entertainment. Anyway, he mentioned Remembrance of the Daleks, which is a go-to piece of evidence when we discuss this sort of thing, on the critique of racism. And so the questioner mentioned it, and the notice in the window, and Jonathan Turner. In that instance, it was all there in the text, and we allowed it through because it's a great point. We don't intend to preach. There was something to draw on there. It's there for those that are astute enough to spot it and to show that times have changed since '63. And just since I've just put Stephen Bellows up saying the hit you on the head messaging of RTD, which is so unsubtle, and actually it's lazy writing. It is harder to make the message subtle, but it's still there. Much harder. And of course, John Nathan Turner is at the other end of this spectrum. He is saying, we don't hit you over the head with it. If you're astute enough, it's there. I have to say, I don't know about you, John, but when I read this article, I thought, do you know what? It is good timing, because I needed this, because I started to doubt myself as a fan, because RTD is insistent on Doctor Who is this, and this.
Yeah.
And he says it with such stridency.
What was it John Nathan Turner always said about ratings and bums on seats? That's why people make programs, to get people to watch them, whether you're making a political documentary, whether you're making a wildlife show, whether you're making a sci-fi drama, fantasy show. You want as many people as possible to watch and enjoy it and walk away from it. In order for them to watch, enjoy, and walk away from it with a message, you have to make sure you produce a quality product. If you're just battering them over the head with a message and everything else is ancillary or second to that, then most people, not only are they not going to watch your program anymore, they're not going to hear your message anymore. So fix one thing and then do the other. And JNT was very right with that. He knew exactly what Doctor Who was there for, principally. What the BBC is there for, to inform, educate, and entertain. Those three things, but principally to entertain. And if by entertaining you can get a little subliminal, or on occasions, whether it's even Barry Letts did the same thing with the Green Death. It was there up front that pollution leads to disaster. However, it was done in the midst of a rolling, good, entertaining story. What we have nowadays is precisely the opposite. We get the message, we'll create a story around it, and whether you want to watch it or not, you will be blamed for abandoning this because you're racist, you're sexist, you're a misogynist, whatever. No, I'm none of those things, I would like to think. I just want to be entertained, and you're not doing it.
It's actually congratulatory for the audience members because, you know, that no coloured sign and Ace's reaction to it, J&T said it there. He's saying it's showing how times have changed. So he's like congratulating society in general as to how far they've come in just a short period of time, relatively speaking, 20 years. So instead of saying, well, this is how the world should be, according to us, a television show, this is how the world is, and well done to all of you watching.
Cyberman?
No, well, it just goes to the contradiction in the current day, you know, and, you know, when J&T saying that things are more dangerous today than they've ever been, and you know, and people that want to say that, you know, things are inherently racist now. I mean, I remember seeing this as a kid, you know, spotting the sign, and I remember talking to my grandmother, and because I was like, I knew something wasn't right with it, but I didn't understand. It was such a foreign concept, because, you know, in 1988 that just wasn't present in my world, and, you know, I asked more questions, so I would have picked up more after the fact, from just seeing that sign without even understanding what it was at the time. And again, highlighting that we had moved on, even, you know,
We see that's
30,
what I mean.
40 years ago.
That's what I mean. I always feel, kind of told off by RTD.
Yes.
I listened to an interview and I'm thinking, oh, I wonder if he thinks I'm one of those. It's as if it gets me on edge. He gets me thinking there must be more I have to improve upon. And then I kind of blank him out because he just goes off TT. And yet there's basically a disrespect. And it's the anti-BBC that's changed into this kind of lecturing, hectoring, patronizing organization in its story writing. I always go back to Rosa under Chris Chibnall, actually, because I thought the show and tell element was missed again there, because again, you had a black companion. You could have had him in peril. And just by the storyline, everybody who relates to Doctor Who and loves Doctor Who and is just following that story and liking the companions would go, oh my God, he's in peril, and it's only because of his skin color, and they might do this, and then a cliffhanger. Just do a blooming cliffhanger. Is he going to be saved? Is Ryan going to be saved? That's what I would have done.
Well, hopefully not.
But this is it. The story would have led you to think, no, this is so ridiculous. This is outrageous to pick on him just because of that.
Yeah.
That would have been the way to do it, rather than, or can we have like we did under Chris Chibnall as well. We'll have a moment in the TARDIS where we see some footage of awards from Bill Clinton and everything.
That's it in a nutshell, Brendan, because if you think it's all about the message coming first, because essentially we create a story in Rosa, which is about an intergalactic bad white guy going around doing what exactly? He just wants to change what Rosa Parks does. Why? Well, because he's white and he's bad. You know, there's no real proper thought gone into a story there. And there was huge possibilities for Ryan, being a child of the 21st century, to be taken back in very much what is the lifetime of his grandfather, Bradley Walsh, to see how things have changed. That could have been a very positive story. In the same way the no coloured sign in 1960s United Kingdom, and where we are now, is a very positive message. We're on a trajectory. Let's not blow it. Let's not go on. But essentially what we get with Dot and Bubble 40 odd years later is a story saying, well, we've come all this way, but we're still terrible, you know, and pointy fingers. And I don't think and I do this from a point of view of my previous career, I don't think that's the way of getting people on board. You
No.
encourage people by saying, we've come this far, let's
I
go.
just keep thinking. I mean, we will probably mention the death of Adric as maybe we might do under the John Nathan Turner umbrella, and it's his time and his legacy and highlights and lowlights. But regarding Ryan and the Chris Chibnall example on where I think you really do it, I can see JWC is joining in the thread regarding not many people seem to like the Rosa episode, but it could have been so much better if. Well, look, Matthew Waterhouse was leaving, so they're going to kill him off in Earthshock. And we all, as Doctor Who fans, go, that was a moment. Well done, JNT. Kept it quiet. Kept it quiet. In Rosa, can you imagine if he decided, Chris Chibnall, to have that story whenever Ryan was leaving? Actually just sequence it properly. And possibly, and I'm going to go there and just say to speculation, can you imagine the dramatic legacy of Ryan is killed in Rosa? That story would be now mentioned as one of the big hitter Doctor Who stories because the message sold us how horrible and evil and violent racism was in the 60s. So just it's a good story to do. Park it till you're, I don't know, that's show and tell, isn't it? That's how to do it.
Yeah, and by that point we would have, I presume, we would have known Ryan better. Did we ever get to know Ryan at all? Don't know. But let's assume that Chris Chibnall, who's a hack, by the way, could have done what you said. We got to know the characters better. And you had done what you said, Brendan. It would have had huge impact because it would have given the story a reason for being. That's the reason why we did it, rather than just let's go and point out how nasty things are back then, how these things were back then. And by the way, you're all still nasty now, so learn from this. It was just lazy. It could have been so much better. And you would imagine that a writer of the caliber of Russell Davies would know that he has a deftness of touch when it comes to messaging. Unfortunately, during this iteration of Doctor Who, he's lost it completely.
Right, now let's do a brief one. We'll do a brief round before we go to the next item. So starting with Dwayne, I'm going to ask you for a highlight from the John Nathan Turner era. So like in my big preface, I was talking about from the death of Adric, the Pantos, the marketing, the death of the Sonic Screwdriver. I went on and on. Is there anything that's a standout where you go, that's one of his greatest legacies?
Well, it's got to be the Five Doctors, doesn't it? It's got to be the anniversary spectacular and he was most proud of that one too. So it's certainly a standout. It's comfort Doctor Who for most fans who want to go back and get that. I love the season 20 Blu-ray 40th anniversary edition. It's probably my favorite version of the show now. I always go to that one. And I think that's his standout, probably the Five Doctors.
Okay, Cybermen?
Look, I think I still feel that he had the capacity for reinvention, even when he was up against the wall. I mean, I look at the McCoy era as quite amazing, really. That so late in someone's tenure that he really did from season 24 to 26. That whole period for that to come out of such a period of crisis, he lost his script editor, he formulated a whole new sort of team. And, again, the show he allowed the people around him to reinvent the show again. And that McCoy era does feel like it feels like the same show, but it does feel very different at the same time. So I'm going to say the McCoy era.
Okay, and as I feed up over to John, obviously I'll feed this in as well because Robbie Bonham says Mordrin was great, and I know what John's going to say in a minute, so I'll just feed that in. But I'll say very quickly, I agree with what people are saying, but I'll add a different one. I think one of the great legacies of John Nathan Turner is Peter Davison, Sylvester McCoy, Colin Baker. You look at those three actors now. You look at them when they do the Five Doctors rebooted. You look at those three. I love them. I'm so glad they were the Doctors. He picked them all. They were great. Go on, John. Your shout out highlight.
Yeah, well, absolutely. You know, I love Modern Undead, but it's not my highlight. But just to go back to something Cyberman was talking about there, that's exactly the case. You know, that towards the end of his era, there was a renaissance, if you like, with McCoy.
Yeah.
The entrance of that coincided with the new script editor coming in, and the lull, the dip, the big trough, if you like, comes not perhaps because of John Nathan Turner, but because of Eric Saywood. And it's the creative input from the script editor who's just out of ideas and who doesn't like the doctor who's been cast, Colin Baker. I think that's probably the reason for the huge dip in John Nathan Turner's areas, because the script editor and him, apart from the personal stuff going on, I just think there was a real creative dip for Saywood. He was going through the motions. He was phoning it in. It was fairly obvious. So that, I think that's the reason for that. But because of that, I would choose, in terms of my high point, season 18 in its entirety. Because even as a boy, come Horns of Nimon, Nightmare of Eden, I was running out of patience with Doctor Who. I really, really was. It was silly. They were right. It was silly. I can look back at it now and quite enjoy it because it happened and we've all moved on. Quite enjoy it. But at the time, and it might be my fledgling puberty and all the rest of it, I just was finished with it. And he came along in August and showed that this program can be entirely different. He proved the point. He reinvigorated it. And there was a whole set of stories there building up to the triumph that was Legopolis, which every single time I go and rewatch it now, and I watch season 18 sometimes in one fell swoop, not all at once, but one after the other, I just loved it. I loved it then, and I love it even more now. So I'd go for season 18. And the combination of John Nathan Turner with all that production expertise and knowing how to stretch a budget, with Christopher Bidmead and Barry Letts, remember, who came in as executive producer, means they were firing on all creative cylinders. Brilliant.
Yeah. And they brought the master back as well in that trilogy that ended with Patrick Welder. Heather, I hope you're all right, but you're trying to catch up now. You haven't been well. Now, Crimpline says, I am forever, and there's a couple of points I want to show you because you can't, they're mentioned in various places. Crimpline, I'm forever grateful to JNT for doing everything in his power to ensure that the greatest show in the galaxy was made rather than becoming a lost story, because that is one of the issues out there, isn't it? And of course, JWC Reviews reminds us, as if we do need reminding, because I think we all know this, that JNT, he wasn't a writer like RTD, but he could, you know, he can do location filming, he can direct, and it's one of my favorite sequences in the Five Doctors, the Raston Rory robot attacking those Cybermen. It was well shot, well edited, well directed. It's a standout Doctor Who moment. And that's down to JNT as well as obviously Terence Dix's writing. Yes, I agree with you, JWC. It is a standout. You don't need piles of money. You just need somebody who knows what they're doing and understands. Now, Colin Baker was mentioned in the article because he talks in the article about, you know, everybody needs 3 years to get into the role. And he talks about Sylvester McCoy's that had just been done up to Survival. You could see how much he'd changed and developed. Peter Davison, and he wasn't shouting out the stories, was he? He just said, I can see how they've developed and matured as a character. And of course, he talks about Colin being, you know, cut from his prime, really. And it is so sad, this. And I have to say, this is why I found that the article so refreshing. You didn't get all this razzmatazz schmaltz that you sometimes seem to get from RTD. You got truth and honesty. And whether it's because he knew that the era was over, literally just, but, you know, he's in that moment when he's looking back and, you know, Colin, not criticizing him. He was cut off in prime. It's so sad to see that, isn't it? And also, by the way, I'll bring in Dwayne here. I think that's a fair criticism about the violence a bit. Colin's doctor followed the Hartnell doctor. Wasn't he of a similar disposition, constantly irritated by his companions? I mean, I have to say, in those early Colin Baker stories, he really seems to be so frustrated with Perry and her Americanisms. But yeah, I find it so sad to read this. But I loved his honesty. That Colin was cut off in his prime, that every doctor seems to need the 3 years to actually establish themselves, Dwayne.
Yeah, absolutely. I was very sad because I was a huge fan of the Sixth Doctor, so it was sad that he only lasted a couple of years at the time. Of course, he has proven, Colin Baker, now that through Big Finish, and be eternally grateful to Big Finish and J&T for creating that Sixth Doctor character. He's given us some amazing stories on Big Finish on audio, and Colin Baker just loves playing him. I don't know, the irritation, the violence that gets aimed at the Sixth Doctor, I don't fully agree with it, because there has been violence in Doctor Who right throughout. I've been watching season 15 in the behind the scenes. I was watching Image of the Fendale. Colin Baker is actually sitting in on, not behind the scenes, behind the sofa. He's sitting in on that. And, we've got some pretty dark imagery in that story. We've got a suicide that the Doctor aids in at the end of that story. And Colin Baker is saying, boy, I was criticised for being violent in my era, but look at what just happened there. That was years before he came along. So, I think it's unfair that he gets criticised for the violent aspect. There's been much more violent Doctor Who. And I'm a little bit biased because Hartnell was always my sentimental favourite, and I like the cranky doctors. I love Capaldi, so yeah, it's sorry.
It's all right. Keep going.
Just trying to think what I was saying. Yeah, I love the cranky doctors, and I always love the Sixth Doctor. So, but he does have a point that it was a little bit unfair that he didn't get to do that 3-year run that seemed to be the sweet spot for doctors.
Yeah.
So I'm about to come to John, but I will obviously do my little segment first. So, John, just before you go, obviously we're talking about John Nathan Turner, but my question is really, what could RTD seriously learn from the John Nathan Turner era? What lessons could be learned from him now, really?
Yeah. Well, in a sentence, build a team around you. He can be all the things that John Nathan Turner was, very much the showman, the CEO, the chief, the president of Doctor Who. John Nathan Turner was very much the man in charge, and he wanted people to know that. Absolutely did. I lived through that time. He was more well known sometimes than the people taking part in the program. He put himself up front there on Breakfast Time, on Blue Peter, on Saturday morning shows. He liked the limelight, as Russell Davies did, as does too. So that's fine. Be all of that. But behind you, build a team, because you don't have all the answers. You don't have all the storylines to make Doctor Who as fresh and as vibrant as it needs to be. If you look across the JNT era, it's not an era, it's a multiplicity of eras, because a lot of people feed into that through the script editors, the writers, the production team, whoever is going on. There's 3 distinct eras. First, they meet Eric Saward, and then the Andrew Cartmel thing. But even within the Saward stuff, Saward starts off quite positively, and then you can see the dip towards the end because he's script editing an unhappy Doctor. So there's like 4 eras, if you like: the violent era, the more positive Colin Baker era, and then the Davison and McCoy eras flanking on both sides. So forgive me for wondering. Build a team around you. Get people to know your faults and frailties, know where your gaps are, and get people to fill them. Because at the moment, Doctor Who is very much a one-man show. He's cast the Doctor, he's cast the companions, he's writing the stories. In an 8-episode season, why is the showrunner writing 6? That's 3/4 of the storylines. This from a man who only a few years earlier said, I have no more ideas. Having watched the season, I agree with you, Russell. You have no more ideas. So it's very important that while you become the flagship, the front runner, the front man of Doctor Who, you have a team behind you who can do all the donkey work, making sure we have good characters, good stories, good plots. That way around, Doctor, let's go to the future. We can talk about the messaging another time, but in terms of your question, Brendan, that's where I'm at.
Okay then. Well, get on with your day, John. I know you've got to go now, so I'll see you later.
Thanks, guys. Thank you very much, Rick. See you all soon.
Bye, John.
Take care. Bye.
Thanks, John.
So, one thing I wanted to pick up, lads, is what could he learn? One of the things I think he could learn, from John Nathan Turner, is don't stay too long. And RTD's now fallen into the trap of he's come back. And I think overall, I don't know about you, you can tell us yourselves, but I kind of liked the first era of RTD overall. It did successfully relaunch the show. I know there were seeds in there that have come to play out now that I don't like heavy romance and all the rest of it. However, coming back, we've now, I mean, I can't find fans who are really defending him anymore. Everybody is quite shocked. And so with John Nathan Turner, some people have said if he'd left after Caves of Androzani, gosh, he would be standout. Now, of course, that's in hindsight. The other version is, though, as you were saying, Cybermat, he did leave after Survival, and the Cartmel master plan was coming into operation with a darker Doctor. And so you could see the potential there that he left the series with. But I do actually think you can be in the series too long. And I think John Nathan Turner knows that. I think in his later interviews, he would say, you know, he stayed to save the show. I mean, he wasn't doing it for pensions and stuff. He seemed to be trying to keep it going. But RTD, I think, is going to suffer the same fate in the end, although much richer.
I think it's certainly, I think a lot of, like you said, a lot of people are shocked at. I was expecting RTDs to come back with messaging. There was messaging there, but all of RTD shows with messaging usually make up for it with strong characterization, which again it shows, it doesn't tell. But this season it's been cringe in terms of telling, just slamming the message home in awkward ways, and I don't even particularly think the messaging was that bad. It was how it was done that made it so unpalatable. But I think one of the things, and you mentioned it before, do you mind if I just read the acknowledgement from Ian Briggs inside his he says here, a story has many authors. Among the authors of this story were John Nathan Turner, who indulged my flights of fantasy, Andrew Cartmel, who didn't, and a dozen teenagers in Ealing for whom it was written. My gratitude to these and others, but especially to Andrew. I mean, that's the humility that you need, and the energy of a young new writer coming to the show. But also it just shows you that, even in that final era, JNT, clearly was opening up to new people coming in. And that's why I look at Moffat and both Moffat and RTD and even Chibnall, that to come out of their eras and to have no successes to take the show forward is an indictment on them as showrunners. They should have been able to pass the torch after 20 years to successive generations. Instead, they're all from the same era, really. They're all of the same age. They have not set the show up for success in terms of bringing along new people along for the ride. And, you can see here that, JNT succeeded in that. Despite what you think of his era, I think it's evident that occurred.
Oh yeah, I mean, you mentioned Ian Briggs, Gallagher. There's loads of writers. Andrew Cartmel. There's loads of writers. Rosa Munro wrote the last one, didn't she? Survival. I mean, he was bringing in new blood, Dwayne. Anyway, I was really just saying any lessons to be learned.
Yes, I've got a lesson that he could definitely learn, and that is to embrace the fans. So JNT obviously knew the kind of people who were in fandom. It says in the documentary on the Blu-ray that he liked the pretty people. He didn't like the nerds so much, but he didn't put anyone down. He was active at conventions. He, even in that interview, he took that person's opinions on board and was able to go back and say, yeah, well, maybe I was wrong in this case.
Yeah.
So he was able to take feedback,
Yep.
and he could take the feedback and either put his case strongly, or he could re-examine his own work and go, well, maybe I should have done this way. That's something that RTD could learn, because RTD is now saying things like, well, no one who works for me would ever dare say anything against me.
Yeah.
That's the attitude that is the complete opposite of JNT. And we know JNT wasn't the easiest man to get along with all the time, but he certainly had some qualities that allowed him to be a person able to receive that feedback.
So
And I think RTD should embrace the fans. He should accept that.
Yeah, I mean, I was just going to add to that, actually. It's a good point. Sadako 24, to me, JNT embraced the fans too much. We know about the continuity thing and Ian Levine and getting lots of, clips in and various things like that. I know that. But I find it's in everything, by the way. I come out of education and you see the managers of old, and I was one of them. When you're at the top, and I don't know about your industries, that you would have to be transparent and take hard questions from union reps and everything in front of a room. Whereas nowadays, the managers won't have a staff meeting with that setup at all. They just won't allow that sort of discussion. And when you think of John Nathan Turner, he would front out loads of shows. And sometimes kids are the worst critics, and they'd phone in and ask a spiky question. We didn't have this phone-in questioning that you get at Comic-Cons and stuff, and this kind of, I adore you, I think you're amazing. No, they just ask hard questions and saying, you can't change the TARDIS chameleon circuit, that would wreck the show, and he has to answer it. And that's why Chris Chibnall exploited that when he went on open air and criticised Pip and Jane Baker to their faces, as if you could do that. So I totally get your point, Dwayne, because John Nathan Turner, to his credit, he fronted out shows where he faced criticism eyeball to eyeball, and yet he didn't diss them. He had an argument. He would explain himself. He would, I suppose, politely and firmly maybe not take one or two criticisms, but give his version. But my God, he fronted up. And I tell you what, all credit to any manager, especially in 2024, because I don't think many managers do front up anymore. Face criticism. Listen to it, explain yourself. Yeah, I get your point totally, Joanne.
But even, I mean, when your boss is telling you that your show's rubbish, and all their actions say we want to knock this on the head, for him to be able to suck that up and push back and I mean, they clearly cut the budget, and for all the criticisms of the look of the show, it's like, well, they didn't give it more money, did they? They wanted to. They really wanted it to die.
He mentions, doesn't he, Dwayne, in the article? He talks about the Happiness Patrol, and he talks about the set, and he says we tried to do a certain thing, but I'm sorry, and he just says it. It looked like scenery. I'm sorry, it looked like scenery, but we were trying something. So it links to your point, Cybermat, that, I just like that honesty, not schmarm. Like I said, I think we're all cynical now to RTD's answers, because you can see everything's brilliant, amazing, and you're thinking, well, it isn't. Whereas you've got John Nathan Turner, who would sell it before the program's on, but he wouldn't. I don't think he'd oversell it. I never saw him overselling it. Like I said, I always talk about Lonleat 83 when he said the first story is Rories of the Deep with the Sea Devils and the Silurians. And he basically just said it like that. I mean, he hardly had you all going, ooh. So, yeah. Now, in the article also, it mentioned the Time Lords. And do you know what, everybody in the thread and that? It is interesting, after all these years later, to hear our final producer and where we are now with present New Who. And he said, he was asked the question about, you tend to show that Gallifrey is very corrupt. And And of course, he starts using words that I would love back now. I think that it should be part of the enigma and the origins of the Doctor. That's why we've tried to instill a bit more mystery into the Doctor in the last 2 seasons to make it more interesting. He thinks the Time Lords are too pompous and we shouldn't see much about origins and his backstory. Alleluia. Why can't he be running Doctor Who now? I know there's an obvious reason, but you know what I mean. That's a custodian of Doctor Who.
Yeah, I mean, I think we need new leadership at the moment.
But Gallifrey, if you do Gallifrey too much, it does ruin it. If you do the Doctor's origins too much, you ruin the Doctor. The program is called Doctor Who, and of course the remark was always why isn't there not a question mark? But the point is, he was supposed to be this mysterious traveler in time and space. And yes, it's a 61-year-old show, and you have to keep doing different versions and interesting ways of telling a story, but keep the enigma as much as you can. And Andrew Cartmel had thought the Doctor we were too familiar with him, so therefore I'll reinvent it and make it more mysterious. I mean, Dwayne, I although I don't like this idea that Gallifrey 1 minute is destroyed, then it's back again and it's destroyed. I think we've messed with that too much. Personally speaking, I'd like to think in this new season that Gallifrey has mentioned that it exists, but we never go there.
Yeah, I'm a little bit different. I always found and find Gallifrey intriguing, but I just find I'm constantly disappointed with how they deal with it.
Yeah.
RTD did get rid of Gallifrey when he first came back in 2005. So he did do that, and I think reasonably successfully. But I didn't like the fact that he was the last of the Time Lords, and for whatever reason he did that. I always find that Gallifrey is an intriguing place. I just wish someone could do it properly. I don't know. Is the Deadly Assassin the only Gallifrey story that's is that the benchmark? Is that only one and done, or should it have been left alone there?
Yeah, see, that's what I mean. The Deadly Assassin, I thought, did it well, but you didn't have that. When you then go back to the Invasion of Time, you had some of the same sets. They kind of thought, well, we can do it again.
I really love the Invasion of Time.
Do you? But what do they call the Shobogans, the outsiders,
yeah.
That's when I started to lose it. I'll be honest. As a kid, I loved the Deadly Assassin stuff. I suppose I was interested in the Time Lords because it was the Doctor's race. I didn't really like this outsiders bit. It kind of went a bit cavemen and all that. That bored me, I must admit. And I think that was a detour we didn't need. Of course, Arc of Infinity use and the 5 Doctors sets. But yes, it's just, you lose Barusa. I kind of like that he was this teacher figure, and then you lose him. Omega's like done to death. I mean, if Omega doesn't come back, I wouldn't care. Razalon is now the big wig. Tectoin, should I go there? The Division. I mean, honestly, I'm over it because I liked it in Deadly Assassin when it was the CIA, a nice joke for the adults, and that was it.
I was actually really intrigued with where the Division might go right up until that, in that season 12, right up until we got the Timeless Child, and the end of that episode just fell apart in terms of what it did. But I was kind of disappointed that the whole Division thing wasn't explored more. I thought we were actually on an interesting trajectory right up until it then turned into the Timeless Child PowerPoint presentation via the Matrix. It was just bizarre. And honestly, that was the first time I ever got up from the show and just went, what the F was that?
Well, this is somebody writing. I mean, I'm sorry, but I, as a teacher who has to kind of keep 30 teenagers happy as much as I can for an hour, you don't do a lecture like that for 10 minutes. It just doesn't work. JWC reviews, undoubtedly it peaked with Assassin, going back to Dwayne's point, and like Blink, the Time Lords and Angels were never served so well ever again. Yeah, this is the point with Doctor Who having longevity, isn't it? That you can have a good idea, well executed. The trouble is, you think, oh, it might be interesting to go back there. And it's a bit like sequels and stuff like that, isn't it? There's only Aliens I can think of that really almost trumped the original. You know, sequels are Wrath of Khan, actually, I suppose, in Star Trek was better than Star Trek, the movie. But sequels are always tricky. Now, he also mentioned in the article, I'll have to make this bigger for everybody at home for a moment. Sorry, lads. About companions. And of course, we can compare with how RTD treats this, because he said, I think that inevitably you can't produce Doctor Who without being influenced by what goes on around you. So, like RTD talks about, you should reflect society. The companion is meant to be a modern, up to the minute, ballsy feminist lady without the soapboxing and there you go, and heavy-handedness. I think that at the same time with Ace, the writers and the script editor work extremely hard to try and make her not the usual kind of cipher that companions fall into the trap of. And so, yes, Ace was a new type of companion. Yes, in some ways, as RTD says, to reflect society and the change, especially for women and young women. But I noticed he said no soapboxing. You know me, I'm slightly uncomfortable with how Ace's character seemed to be the story in that last season. I know the last season of McCoy was better, but I got a bit, you know, it's like, I'm going to land you in Ghostlight and I'm going to scare you stiff because you need to learn. I was like, what? And, you know, face your demon. She had no choice there. I don't know if people would actually accept that in 2024, that she was given no choice, because everybody wants a safe space. But Dwayne, your thoughts on the Ace companion and whether actually RTD and JNT are a bit similar here or not?
I think they are a little bit similar, actually, in this case, because I think the character of Ace, I do like it very much, but she became a bit of a prototype for what was to come with Rose, and she was the kind of main focus of it. Not only that, but they were doing multi-series arcs. So we had Ace appear in Dragonfire, and that arc carried over with a little hint in a couple of hints throughout season 25, particularly with the chessboard in Silver Nemesis, and then concluded with the curse of Fenric, and even well, I think it was pretty well concluded by the end of Curse of Fenric, and they were sort of getting on with things by survival. So yeah, I think they're a little bit similar, but his motivation for doing it was not to be an audience identifier, someone you could identify with, as much as making an interesting character that wasn't just stereotypical of all the other companions that have been throughout the 25-year history of Doctor Who. I think that was his motivation. Yeah.
And having been at Dross recently, you know, as you know, Caroline Ford, I always think, you know, the first companion got changed and evolved into a, you know, screaming in perils of Penelope Pitstop type thing. And we had all those years of that. And then you start to get with Katie Manning to a degree, I have to say. You get with Sarah Jane. She was a feminist, as in, I think they say women's liber at one point in early doors, but there was no soapboxing. So I found that interesting.
Yeah. Now, but they always kind of devolved. They started off really strong, like Sarah Jane was a strong, independent woman, but she kind of devolved into that more dependent character throughout her time as she stayed with the Doctor. And it was same with Susan. Susan was a fantastic character to start with. I mean, the first episode was named after this mysterious character, and then she just devolved into a sort of a nothing character very quickly. And
I know
a jolly good one too.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, Dwayne is Sirens of Audio, and they have got a very recent stream interview with Caroline Ford. And Caroline Ford, I mean, she was young, and you know, she must have been so excited by getting this role of this very challenging, different, unearthly character. And then the disappointment must have been tangible when she realized, oh, I'm turning into just this, girl in peril. And hence why she left by Dalek Invasion. What have you got there then? Let's have a look.
Oh, it's Ace with a massive anti-tank rocket.
You see, isn't it funny? Because people go on about, units. Some people don't like the militaristic element, but you've got Aeth's weapons like hell. I mean, it's just,
Yeah, I mean, you can compare that to the Moffat season where he's like crapping on Danny Pink the whole season for being in the military, and I'm like, dude, you're part of a paramilitary organization. Why
Yeah.
are you crapping on soldiers?
Yeah. So you've got in the article, violence was mentioned. In fact, I think this is where John Nathan Turner seemed to want to push back a bit because he thought that seemed to be the agenda of the questioning. And quite fairly, as you can see, it's a fulsome answer. John Nathan Turner said, look, come on. In the first story, the Doctor was going to knife somebody. Then he was going to stone somebody with a jagged rock. Excuse me, he's an alien after all. Look, it was something that we did in that particular season, and I will stand by it. This is, I think, vengeance. There was vengeance and 2 Doctors, wasn't there? That was what the writer intended. It was passed by the script editor at the time, and it was passed by me, and we did it. As I said, my only reservation with Shock Eye was how it was played, because obviously he's a cannibal, but he was quite likable, really. He's quite a sympathetic version. But I like the way he defends the violence there, because obviously they were getting it in the neck, weren't they, at this point?
Absolutely. I think it was
Yeah.
it was totally unjustified. So it was they were just looking at the present moment and not looking at the whole history. I mean, Mary Whitehouse was still around. They should have got in touch with her to get a full list of violence. She would have had a checklist, I'm sure.
I mean, I had no problem with this time. I know people talk about Attack of the Cybermen and the bloody hands. Of course, I was aware
awesome.
of it. Yeah. I was more aware of seeing the wires that had the explosives on them. I was getting a bit older then, so I could see where they were trying to make it special effect, but I could see all the wires everywhere and how heavily choreographed the deaths of all the Cybermen at the end were. I was more focused on that than going, oh gosh, they've shown a bit of blood. Wow, that's unusual for Doctor Who. That was it. Obviously, I was a bit older. And then, of course, we come to the end of the article when he talked about his time. I mean, the context is, everybody, I'll just say it one more time, is he just learnt after Survival had been, in the can, that they would not take up another year, the BBC, and they were just looking out for an independent company, which, as we all know, it took another 7 years to get to the Doctor Who movie. So he knows the time is up, but he wasn't declaring it at this point. And so when he looks back with either affection, you can't then compare stuff to The Curse of Fenric, which was made in 89 and shown in 89. So I can't really have an overview of a 10-year period of my life, because he's talking about Leisure Hive compared to Curse of Fenric. From 1989, I can say that I'm relatively pleased with what ended up being the final season of Classic Who. I'm pleased with its content. It's a wide mix by 4 talented writers, executed by 3 talented directors. I have my reservations, and they will remain private.
I wonder what they were.
I know. I'm very intrigued. I mean, we're talking about Ghostlight, we're talking about Curse of Fenric, we're talking about Survival. I wonder if at this point they had filmed the ending, knowing that it was finished, or whether he's going, oh God, if I knew the series was over, I wouldn't have finished it like it was originally intended. Yeah.
Well, this was done a couple of weeks before it aired.
Okay.
Wasn't it? So I'm wondering whether Ghostlight was probably done. So it was all over at this stage. It was just waiting to go out to air. And because I think the article did mention that he knew at this stage. He was the only one that knew that it had been cancelled. Even the actors didn't know at this stage.
Oh, that's that one point about the reservations. I wonder if after the season aired, the reservations were allayed, because I just can't think of what he would have been worried about with in hindsight.
Well, it's. I mean, yeah, we're speculating. Great fans do this. I mean, I'm just wondering whether season 26 was a shift, and at this point, he doesn't know how it's going to be received. So, is there a point when you're going, "Gosh, it's almost like fingers crossed"? We have made a change to the Doctor. We've made him more mysterious. We're making his origins a bit more murky. We have really gone different. I mean, some would call it radical then. whether he felt nervous about that and whether he had reservations that has this worked. Obviously now you look back and you go, God, that was a great season with so much potential offered. I suppose we'll never know, but I do wonder if, when you've been producing Doctor Who looking like it had done, and then suddenly it changes, whether you are nervous about that. I don't know.
Maybe he'd just looked at the rushes of the animatronic cat.
Yeah, the furries.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because he had Hale and Pace in it. I don't know. You could be thinking, yeah. You're always a critic of your own work, aren't you? So whether he's been looking at it, and it is very hard to think, how will this be received? RTD.
Maybe.
Sorry,
maybe he wondered whether or not Ghostlight was going to, anyone could make sense of it. Maybe he didn't quite get it.
Well, it's possible. I always wonder with the Christopher H. Bidmead scripts, when JNT got them on his desk, whether he actually completely understood them and thought, yeah, well, I mean, because I still say Logopolis, which John Daly was saying, is one of his go-to stories. Yeah, I get it. I mean, it was funereal, it was atmospheric and everything, but I can't imagine being sat behind the producer's desk and going, right, so our regeneration story for the longest serving Doctor is on a planet with mathematician old men, and there's a fight over a satellite dish and where it aims. Okay, right. That that sounds sexy. It just fascinates me, that one. But he's got so many legacies, hasn't he? The producer of John Nathan Turner. So I'm going to ask you for a few others, because obviously it wouldn't be fair me just doing his article. So please, in the thread, tell us where you think. Look, John Nathan Turner. Look what he did here. I mean, obviously, my example is you saw him fronting out the Lonleat, and this was, one of the early conventions. And of course, he was the forerunner of all that. He was, he was trying to get Doctor Who out there, and he looked after every actor. I mean, I don't know how many times I was in that marquee. There he is with Patrick Troughton. There he is with Elizabeth Sladen, Caroline Ford, and John Leeson, looking after them again when they take a panel. And remember, this wasn't really done then. Yes, Dwas and small groups would have, of the diehard fans would meet them all in one little room or something, but this was big scale. And so, John Nathan Turner was fronting that left, right, and center. He was, and I'm appreciative of that, because I was lucky. But it had John Nathan Turner all over it. Of course, the new TARDIS console. I mean, didn't we love that in the Five Doctors when you saw it? Jazzing it up, looked as though it had a bit of money on it. Bringing the master back, not as a madman. I mean, by picking Anthony Ainley, he seemed to be making a nod, obviously, to Roger Delgado. So there was a respect there. The Five Doctors, as some of you have said, wow, that is one of his, that's a highlight. And getting them together, killing off the sonic screwdriver, making the story writers work harder. Of course, I did say earlier, picking those three actors. Aren't we happy? And of course, Dwayne's very happy because he's got Sylvester coming over to Australia that's the early one, isn't it? Is that the September one?
No, that's November. Sylvester's here in November.
Yeah.
Fraser and Katie are September.
Okay. Got it wrong. Terrible me. That's terrible. Of course, the death of Adric. Doctor Who fans know that was the key moment, killing off a companion. I think it had only been Sarah Kingdom before, and Katarina. Then, of course, people did mention stunt casting or the guest stars. I mean, there's different ways of looking at it. Is it stunt casting, or is it just you're getting people in so you get media coverage? And as John said before he left, the Leisure Hive and that change in tone, music, style. So where would you like to go, Cyberman, on his choices and your memories of what John Nathan Turner brought to the show that we haven't?
Look, I mean, John was right. The season 18 reinvention. I mean, considering that's Tom at 7 years, I really feel that they got the best out of out of him in that last season, you know, and really darken the tone of his era towards the end there. I really enjoyed season 18. So, to be honest, though, I don't. I would have said Trial of the Time Lord's probably the season that I struggle with the most out of his entire reign, probably. And it's not because it's bad. It's just I feel like with hindsight now, you can feel the desperation in the show trying desperately to get its foothold back. Because I mean, when you look at season 22, it's a fantastic season, and I just think that the show, I don't think the production of the show really lost its footing. You know, the politics around the show that erupted. It's obvious that people up top we're going to find a reason to knock the show off its footings, and I'm amazed that they weren't decisive enough to leave it off the air back then in
Well,
1986.
Well, they did kill it off then. I mean, it was only because all of us lot went off our rocker. I mean, you know, like I said, I can remember seeing the Sun newspaper. I was on my lunch break from college. I'd walked just down the road. We often just walked and, you know, got some drinks and then came back. I saw the Sun newspaper. I saw it said Doctor Who was axed. And of course, I can't remember anything from the rest of the day because it was like such a drama and disaster. And as you know, the BBC had to really do a lot of backpedaling then because it was quite a furore. They wanted to kill it off, and let's be honest with us, that was their strike. They just didn't expect the response because, as I've always said in a lot of our streams, the BBC have never understood what Doctor Who is, why it's successful. They just don't. They're all, you know, accountants and stuff at the top who don't understand TV. I mean, Dwayne, where would you like to take it regarding what's not been said about John Nathan Turner that is fully deserving of a mention?
Well, as much as we love Dudley Simpson, he made a decision to get rid of Dudley Simpson and bring in the Radiophonic Workshop, which provided us with some really cool soundtracks for a lot of those stories. So Paddy Kingsland was mentioned in the thread. There were plenty of others. Jonathan Lim actually is probably my favorite soundtrack because I love the soundtracks to Caves of Androzani and Revelation of the Daleks. They're my favorite JNT soundtracks. Interestingly, directed by Graham Harper. So he, you know, and Graham Harper is that kind of link between the JNT era and the new era as well. So it was great to get that that new music in, and it kept going all the way through, even from Trial of a Time Lord when it changed to Dominic Glenn, and then it changed again for the McCoy era. It was quite a change from that classic 70s sound that we had that was majority Dudley Simpson.
And it was a shock, I have to say. I took a while to like it. It was a shocker. It did give you a sense. I mean, to me, I have to say, and I can see why John Daly has affection for season 18, because in a way, although I was traumatized that Doctor Who didn't feel, smell, or look the same at all, but deep down, I felt a bit pleased because it seemed to be more expensive. It's just the color, the direction. We've just been watching Leisure Hive in this house, and just watching the direction, everything's changed. I mean, I have to say, what do you think of that opening sequence with on the Brighton beach? Because I forgot how it was very long. It took a while, and there's a long while before
scene.
Yeah, before you get Tom Baker snoring, and I don't know if that was a risk too far because wow, you are, I think, 25-30 seconds before you even hear the character. Wow, and all you're seeing is just the backs of huts. That was a brave move. Now, Raymond Williams, good to see you. You said John Nathan Turner was a nice man. I sent my DWAS membership fee to the wrong address. Somehow it ended up on John's desk. Sent me a lovely letter saying he had sent it on. Said he was delighted I was joining DWAS. I love hearing from fans. It's just those little touches He's a busy man, for God's sake. We know that. But coming back to your point, Cyberman, about the pressure and the confidence and the BBC attacking, the program. RTD has one fantastic advantage, which is, yes, he isn't questioned. He has got big budget behind him. And it seems he's allowed more free reign. Can you imagine being John Nathan Turner and the program is under attack? You know that there are challenges about the actor. You know that they're just throwing you around the schedules. And you know that you've just had a reprieve with Trial of a Time Lord. The pressure, and I have to say the second guessing of yourself, that second guessing, it's a bit like Graham Williams taking over after Philip Hinchcliffe. And he knows that he's got to go so far that way, which is why I struggle with the Ribus operation, because the humor's just laid on, for me, too thick. And it's such a dramatic jolt. It calms down and it mellows, but you can see how Graham Williams must have been challenging himself all the way, going, well, we can't go anywhere near that. We've got to be so careful there. And it's awful for a creative person to have to second guess themselves. And
not only that, he had his script editor, which is effectively his 2IC, just actively try to throw him under the bus to the people upstairs as well.
Yeah.
And publicly humiliated him. And on top of that, J&T was asking for feedback around what's wrong with the program, and they weren't going to say, oh, it's the money, because it needs more money spent on it, because they didn't want to spend the money on it. And so he was getting weak feedback in terms of, well, what's actually wrong.
I mean, the show's under massive pressure. And if you went to your executives above you and you say, what type of Doctor Who do you want? The answer is, well, we don't actually know. There'll be no answer. It's just, you either make it or you don't, but we're not going to give it legs. I mean, what is the stupid point? It says in the article, doesn't it, that this interview was just before it was just after they'd announced to him that the season was over and they wouldn't renew. And then on top of that, they might seek out an independent company. What the BBC think it's all about money, do they? What is this thing? As I said, they don't understand it. So they go, oh, we'll give it to somebody else. Why? The answer's not money. You don't understand the program. It was never money.
And PB Props makes the point that they deliberately moved it into the schedule to really give it a hiding, because they wanted to take it off the air. I know that there was backlash, but I mean, if they really wanted it off the air, given what they did, I'm surprised that they sort of reneged.
We've got here Quality Candor. Hello. Recently watched The Leisure Hive in full and I quite enjoyed it. Howl's score, because it's on one of the albums. I'm sure you've all got it. And I was playing it to death. The stylish model effects and that genuinely cinematic direction. Yeah, totally agree. It shocked me. Really did.
Great new opening as well.
I do you know, should we have an argument about that? Because I have to say, it's the first time we saw a kind of Star Trek Enterprise surrounded by stars in Doctor Who. And I don't know if that's where Doctor Who is supposed to be, because the tunnel effect, that idea that you are going through a vortex, I think is clever Doctor Who. When Doctor Who tries to be Star Wars or tries to do Star Trek and is just traveling through some stars that go past, I find it quite tame. I find it quite dull. I find it unimaginative. When you look at 2005, and there can be criticisms of that, but I was interested in that idea that one of the vortexes is time and one of them is space, and then you see the TARDIS in the middle. But I've never been a stars one. Look at the Sylvester McCoy era when we had 3 rocks, a bit of cartoon writing. Is that really? I think Cybermen that the stars is a mishit. I personally think. See what the thread thinks.
Where do you stand on the neon logo?
Yes, I was challenged by it at the time. I don't think it's my favorite. The only bit about the opening sequence, am I allowed to say this live on telly? Is the when it splinters out. So yeah, it says the leisure hive and then it splinters above and below. I kind of always like that blurring effect, but it's a bit like the Superman movie. We all went to the pictures at a certain time, right, Cybermat? And three-dimensional lettering was the big thing after Superman. Now it looks so kind of the neon is of its time, but the neon lettering, if anyone in the thread can remember, it's just the Tomorrow people lettering, really, isn't it? And the
Oh, it's
Tomorrow
of its time. There's a lot of 80s
yeah.
stuff that has that sort of styling on it. Yeah.
I mean, I took a risk there because obviously, in front of Doctor Who fans, when you say something like that, they go, "What sacrilege?" At least Greg Smith agrees with me on the neon logo. It was very Tomorrow people. PB Propso, Sid Sutton wanted to open up the title sequence to broaden the idea that the Doctor travels through the universe. Well, look, if there's thinking behind it, PB Props, I can kind of go with it. I start to worry sometimes whether they were just trying to ape Star Trek and Star Wars on the cheap.
I thought the new theme tune that they brought in was great.
It still took time because Blue Peter did exactly the same thing. They kind of just jazzed it up electronically and with a guitar and that, and you thought, oh, I don't know. I struggle. I was at university when you had the Colin Baker opening sequence, and we changed it again. Was it Dominic Glynn then? I think. And it had a quiet kind of strum of the guitar to me, and I was thinking, this is supposed to be electronic and weird and ethereal, really. And I felt as though I could detect. Mind you, the same with Murray Gold. You can hear the opening sequence, the theme tune, and I can go, right, there's the drums, there's the this, there's a. Whereas, of course, with Delia Derbyshire, it was just so strange, and I kind of wanted that. I didn't want Doctor Who to sound like it was just another show trying to be jazzy in the 80s.
Well, see, and I find it hard to separate now, but I met Kath McCulloch years ago, and J&T got him to demo the theme tune, and as payback for doing the theme tune, the signature tune for McCoy, I think he said, "Well, you can't be credited for this, so he threw him a bone and gave him some opportunity to do the incidentals," which he was very upfront with the fact that he copped a lot of criticism for it. But
yeah,
from my perspective, it is the McCoy era, so I didn't.
I will just pick up what Lee problem being you know far more about this than me. I thought I was hearing some sort of guitar, but I will bow to your better judgment because I ain't got a clue. But that's how it sounded.
Can I just say that the Howl theme is my personal favorite theme? Believe it or not,
it's a good theme.
Maybe because I was at that age and it is of its time. It is contemporary of Star Wars. All us kids were crazy about Star Wars at the time. So if this was Doctor Who becoming like as good as Star Wars, we can look back now in retrospect and go, well, maybe it was trying to copy it, but that was all the rage. We were all very excited about that kind of thing at the time. So
yeah,
but the Howl theme always invokes a very special part of my childhood for me.
Yeah, and I can hear the Howl music now at Longleat because every blooming marquee, when you walk from one to the other, you could hear the wow. It made Doctor Who distinctive, I suppose, as distinctive as the 70s music or the 60s music did. I grant that. But the longer version, when you get the album, the Peter Howell one, I love the longer version of it when it builds up and everything. I do like it as a piece of music. I think I'm trying to relay the shock at the time, and it took me a long time to really go, I prefer this to this one. It took a long time. So, I mean, obviously, this is firing people up. Delia was a true musical visionary. Well, we agree with that, Gareth Morgan. Problem being, and who obviously very musical. Howell's theme got me so excited for Doctor Who. I loved it. Yes, it is kind of picked up, isn't it? Because I have to agree.
I agree. I
There
agree
is a
with what
problem
you were
that-
saying, where it builds up.
Yeah, there is a problem. I agree. You couldn't keep the 70s tunnel sequence and that music for another decade. I agree that something had to change. And so, yeah, I suppose this is what everyone's saying is the change excited people. And the music's a great piece of work. I agree.
Just imagine we could have had the Delaware version.
Yeah.
Thank goodness we didn't.
Yes, that's a good point to make. Well, it's got everybody fired up. Of course, as fans, we all have our version. Yeah, the orbital rendition was great. Yes. I mean, look, it happened. You get used to it. It became my version in the end, because let's face it, that's when I was doing all my audio recordings. And so every kind of time I listened to it on my headphones, it was the Peter Howl version anyway. After that, it's just the changes and the arrangements, a bit like from the 60s to the 70s. I struggled with one or two of them, but I mean, if we've eulogized about the new theme tune, so to speak, which version were you slightly less enamored with out of the versions they did of Peter Howell's?
I think Peter Howell's original one, the Dominic Glenn one, was okay. I'm not critical of any of them, to be honest. I think they're all great in their own right. They're all.
I see. I struggled with the McCoy one.
I still remember just being like, "Wow, is this?" I remember when I first saw it, thinking, "Is this the same show?" Yeah, it is. It's the same show, and I remember just thinking, "Wow, this is so cool." It's like the same but different.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, PB Props here saying, look, what you've got to do, turn the bass up, wear headphones, listen to the Howl version. It is more complicated than... No, I agree. And when you listen to it on the album and you listen to the full version, there's so much going on. I totally agree with you.
I love the YouTube. There's a YouTube video which is, I think it's ripped off one of the DVD specials, where they show they have Peter Howl building up and showing how he actually does it, and it's really cool.
Yeah. So there you go. What's that? PB Props. McCoy's titles and theme tune were just dreadful. And this is the thing, you can't win them all. And John Nathan Turner, who we've been talking about for 10 years, rode that wave. You can't please everybody, and if you try and please everyone, you make a beige program, don't you?
What did you think of the theme in 2005 when it came back?
I did. Do you know there's a version I really liked? People might know in Britain they had Blue Peter on, and you know when they're marketing it, and they're suddenly going all these shows. So Doctor Who went on Blue Peter, and it sounded Aboriginal, as in, it's the same Murray Gold music, but there's a bit in it that sounds a little bit like a didgeridoo. There's a bit in it, and I thought, and it's when Chris Eccleston walks into the TARDIS and he says, "Do you want to come with me?" It's that little trailer, and I thought, oh wow, this is great. I've never quite really heard it in the kind of wham bam thank you ma'am opening credits, but it's there, isn't it? Did you?
Yeah, there's like a twang, sort of a boing.
Yeah. I kind of thought, oh, I like this, especially when I saw the inside of the TARDIS for the first time as well. It got a bit faster and faster, the Murray Gold one, didn't it? With series 2 and 3, it seemed to go faster, more bang wallop. I was watching Stolen Earth the other day.
They stuck the drums in, didn't they?
Yeah. And I don't know.
I liked when they brought the electric guitar back for Voyage of the Damned. I thought that was, it was leaning into the Peter Davison sort of vibe of the Howl.
This is where it reflected RTD quite a lot, where it was all very fast, frenetic, wallop. If you look at Stolen Earth, as you know, you got about 7 actors thrown at you as well in that Superman style. The music's fast, and all of a sudden you're going, we're losing atmosphere here. This is very just bang. Here's an explosion for you. and then you go back to the 70s tunnel and go, right, we've lost something here. Just let's get the atmosphere back. It's not all about explosions and wham bam. Come on. That's where I started thinking. So I was very excited in 2005 to answer your question. When we got to 2010, I thought, hold on. This is too loud and whacking me around the ears. And where's the mood gone?
I like the ooey of Matt Smith's era when they brought back the ooey.
Yeah. Or the Capaldi one, which sounded like a screeching record. Remember that one?
I struggle with that. I still struggle with that one, actually.
Yeah.
It's probably my least favorite of the new series. Yeah.
Yes, it's true. It's almost like a cat screeching. I thought, what is that? Anyway, we've our detox hours turned into 2, which is normal for us. But there you go, folks. It was all John Nathan Turner. In retrospect, John Nathan Turner, the greatest showman, maybe, of Doctor Who. Isn't it funny? It's always 3 letters. John Nathan Turner, JNT versus RTD. Which one would you prefer to be the custodian of Doctor Who now? And like Malcolm Hulk, I'll leave it open for you to decide. Thank you for being on Cybermat. And actually persuaded me to do today because I was in a bit of a moody, wasn't I? I wasn't really going to do today, really. So thanks, Cybermat, for kind of just,
That's been fun. It's been fun, and I hope everyone in the chat. I could see some people hating on the McCoy era there, but
it's as it is. Dwayne, thank you for your time as well. I hope you enjoyed that.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me back.
And we'll do it again shortly. But everybody in the thread, you've been very busy. We've all got opinions. We're in the dead season now. JNT was a good topic, wasn't it? Because there's so much there. Anyway, good night, the Aussies. And I'll see you again, everyone. Bye.
See you guys.